certainly have fears that there is a serial killer at loose in Perth.
Sarah Spears, Jane Rimmer, Kira Glennon.
And every time you saw a young girl walking by, you think, oh God, is she going to be the next victim?
Now, one man stands accused.
If police are right and Edwards is the Claremont serial killer, he's been hiding in plain sight for 20 years.
December 22nd, 2016. The Tactical Response Group stormed a Perth home and took Bradley Robert Edwards into custody. Along with dozens of police, grew a huge media presence. But little did they know what was about to unfold.
It's taken 20 years, but police believe they've finally caught the Claremont serial killer.
Welcome to this bonus episode of Claremont in Conversation. Natalie, Bonjolo and Tim Clarke with you. Also joining us, two people who were there that day, veteran Channel 7 cameraman Raab and photographer with the West Australian Justin Benson-Cooper. Now, Ray, you were dispatched to a house in Kewdale. What did you know about what was going on at that time?
Oh, we just knew there was a huge police presence. And we got there, the road was blocked off, saw lots of police activity. But what was unusual about the whole thing is you try to read body language, from the cops. You want to know what it's all about. And they gave nothing away. It was as quiet as it could be. And I remember talking to the opposition who actually had a shot of him being brought out. They had the guy. They were asking us, do you know what it's about? Can you give us any info? And it was like no one would say a word. It was very unusual.
And I imagine the journalists and yourself as the camera operator, you're asking questions, you're speaking to the police. What exactly are they saying? Nothing. They're just tight-lipped.
I don't know how the cops did it. To have the biggest fish, they've just caught the biggest fish in our history here, being able to not say a thing, not give anything away by body language. I mean, I would have been jumping up and down. I wouldn't have been able to contain myself, And you'd bring police media up to see whether you could get something out of them, and nothing. And it wasn't until I got back to the station that it all sort of came together.
Yeah, and I imagine while you were out there that, you're getting calls from the Chief of Staff, you're getting calls from the News Director, and they're saying, what's going on?
I know. And that was the frustrating part about it. Like, we all wanted to know. At first, you think, it's just another drug raid, like you've done a few of those over the years. But just something was really different about this. It was the body language of the police. You could see there was probably a certain amount of excitement. I don't know how they were able to hold it back. I mean, I would have been high-fiving, like it was the big fish.
And now you've been around the block a bit. How many years have you been a cameraman?
Oh, now. Actually, just last week it was 48 years.
48 years.
Yeah.
So this to you, though, felt very different to anything else.
Yeah, you just, when you get the vibe, it's kind of, we work a lot off how people react, and you look at body language, you look at what happens in the neighbourhood. No one could tell us anything. The neighbours couldn't give us anything. And, journos are asking questions, camera crews are sort of wondering what's going on. We knew that the opposition had a shot. We knew they had someone coming out that was arrested. But the funny thing was they were asking us, do you know anything about it? And I go, mate, no.
So everyone knew that something big was going on. The station down the road, they knew that they had a shot of someone, however, they had no idea of the significance. So as the day unfolded, this is what Channel 7 News was reporting by 6 p.m. that night.
Good evening. As we go to air, there's a major crime scene in place at a house in Kewdale. Jamie Freestone is there.
The house has been cordoned off all day, but police aren't revealing what they are looking for other than to say what they're doing is related to an ongoing investigation. Neighbours say they saw officers from the heavily armed Tactical Response Group descend on the house about 7 o'clock this morning.
About 6:30, and I heard a real loud yell, and then it sounded like a scream, and I didn't think all that much about it. Came out about an hour later, and there was a lot of police cars.
Been neighbours with them for so long, and they've always kept themselves, but it's quite shocking.
So 6 p.m. that night, still, no one really knows what is going on. Justin, you were rostered on that day as well. At what point did you find out what this was all about?
Look, I just came off shift, and maybe a couple of hours after the shift, I got a call from my picket, and he said, "Look, we think this is it. The cops have got someone, and we think this is the Claremont serial killer." And so we're going to roster photographers around the clock. So someone was rostered on till midnight. So I got midnight to 8 a.m. And I remember as I pulled up, it was literally just us. And, the opposition wasn't there. It was us and 7. Sunrise was there as well. I guess they wanted to do a live cross if the guy came out and we got the exclusive. But there was a lot of waiting around, and we had no idea what was going to happen. And it was just, what's going to happen? What's going on here?
And where were you waiting? So where had you been sent to, and where were you all waiting?
It was the back of the Hatch building, which is on Stirling Street, and that's where the detectives do a lot of their sort of questioning of suspects. And it was just a quiet street, and you watch people walk past, and just sort of after a big night out, and it was actually quite entertaining. I remember we were just hanging out, having a good old chat, and just being really entertained. It was great fun. Yeah.
And so, tell us about what happened in that 8-hour shift. You were rostered from 12 till 8 a.m. Did someone come out? What did you see?
They did eventually come out at 4 a.m. But leading up to that, I remember there was a lot of, obviously, we've only got one shot at this. They're not going to bring him back for a second run. So I remember, it was obviously I've got the stills camera with the flash, and the TV guys have got the light. So we want to make sure that we both get the shot. So I remember we were doing tests on the, sort of through their news van, to make sure that, because a lot of it's sort of you're flying blind. You don't actually know, where Bradley Edwards is in the car, or whoever it was in the car. Is he on the other side of the vehicle? Is he close to you? So you don't know how much flash you need to give it to get through the. So we were all testing our gear and what sort of settings to get the perfect shot. So that was we're just having a chat. Who is this guy? Who have they got? When are they going to come out? And we're sort of occasionally a cop would come out, and we're sort of trying to get their mannerisms, like what's going on here? Are they giving anything away? And eventually, we did get okay, guys, within the hour, we'll be coming out. And we did make a request of them, could you go real slow, guys, just to give us the best chance here of getting the shot? And they're like, yeah, no worries. And so sure enough, they came out nice and slow. So we were literally able to walk with the car until it got well on the road, and then it sped off. But it was plenty of time for our shots.
And Ray, were you there at this point as well?
No, because what had happened is I stayed there. My brief was to be relieved by the early crew, which is a 2 o'clock start. So 2 a.m. in the morning I was going to pull out and go. But, I didn't want to pull out, to tell you the truth, because, I go way back in this story, when it all first started.
Yep.
Spending nights up at Claremont and all that sort of stuff, and wondering who it is and what it is. And so the excitement was there, and I wanted to sort of, I stayed there pretty close till 4 o'clock. Yeah. And I literally just pulled out. And Luke, who took over from me, said, mate, he's about to come out. And I knew that they were going to take him to the police lockup. So I said, look, I'll shoot to the lockup. I'll get him we'll get 2 bites of the cherry here. Because one of the things that Justin just said is you only get one crack at this. And you'll never see this guy again, possibly, if it is him. So you've got to make the most of it. So I thought, look, I'll get another shot as he's going up the ramp. And sure enough, a few seconds later, the car comes up the ramp and bang, you've got it. And it's the roller door that usually gives it away. As soon as I saw the roller door go up, I knew it was payday.
And so, we've seen that picture many, many times, but can you just describe it to us, what you saw through the camera lens?
I kind of knew roughly where he would be seated in the car, because we've got a fair idea where they tend to put people, and he would obviously be covered up. So you kind of sort of got to reckon with, try to get as close as you can to the actual window. And it was very quick because the roller doors, it was all prepped. The roller doors went up, I knew the car wasn't going to slow down too much. So you literally, as soon as you see the car, you're rolling, you press the button, and you get up as close as you can to the window and just keep shooting as they go up the ramp. And then take a breath.
Yeah. And
Have
then
a
you,
look back and see if you got it.
Yeah.
That's right. And then you obviously call back to the newsroom and say, yeah, we've got
No,
a
I
shot.
called Luke, because I think the newsroom was still asleep, mate. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, but I called Luke and, we sort of exchanged. He told me what he got and I told him what we had. And, it was one of those things. I was actually quite surprised that the opposition wasn't there, because I thought, being such a big story. Anyway, it worked out well for us.
And Justin, we also see the photograph that you've taken. We've seen that many, many times, and all the footage that we see, we hear that camera clicking and that shutter going. Can you describe that moment, I guess what it feels like when you get that shot and what it looked like to you through the lens?
Yeah, well, as Rabi was saying, you don't know you've got the shot until after the car's sped off. So you sort of go back through your shots, and of course you need that flash to go through the window so you can see the guy. And of course, if the flash is higher than the glass, of course it's not gonna pierce through the glass. So there's plenty of shots in that burst that I got where it's just black. And so, when you look through the shots, you can actually see something like, wow, this is fantastic. So, look, I was pumped. I mean, if I would have missed the shot, the boss isn't going to be happy.
No.
And I remember calling the Wirepix desk, because of course they get on at 6. Did you get the shots? So, yeah, oh my God, of course we got the shots. Wow, nice work.
But I bet you must have been holding your breath as you were looking back through the shots.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, this is, as Raab was saying, you can't recreate this, and this is a huge moment in history, as we know now. I mean, obviously we knew it was him. Unfortunately, he was covered up in I think it was a jacket from memory.
Yeah.
Over the head, yeah.
Which obviously isn't ideal, but we know who's underneath it, and you can see by sort of the, I guess, the broad arms and the broad shoulders that it was Bradley Edwards in the back of that car.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but take a breath, and I think I actually shouted myself Macca's breakfast after that as a reward. So
I think it was a lot harder for you because you were on your own.
Yeah, true.
We had a couple of crews there, so at least one of us would have got a half decent shot.
Yeah.
But being on your own.
Yeah.
So moving forward from 4 a.m, it's the next morning, it's December the 23rd, and Carlo Callahan, who was the police commissioner at the time, holds the most important press conference of his career. Now, Tim, you were there for that. Can you talk us through what that time was like when you're sitting there waiting for the commissioner to speak?
Tense. I haven't been doing it quite as long as Rabsy, but I've been doing it a fair while. And Ray's exactly right. You know when it's you know when it's a big story, and then you know when it's a massive story. And this was bigger than massive. I mean, and it had built up over the evening. So I personally got a call from our news desk I'd actually left the office about 5:30. I made it home. Perth traffic was kind that day for once, and I got a call from our news desk, and it was a call that I'd never taken before, because our chief of staff at the time was a really calm, really together type of characters. You'd need to be in that role because you've got a million balls in the air. But even Spence I could tell something was going on by the tone of his voice and the way he was talking to me. And he said, yes, well, this is what we think's happening. We're changing complete front page. We don't need you to come back, but we need to do this, this and this. And that included getting ready to go to a press conference in the morning and then going straight to court after that. And so that's what I did. I didn't get much sleep, I've got to say, just thinking about what it could all mean, and whether what we thought was happening, but we didn't actually get the confirmation officially until Carlo Callahan stood up in that press conference. It was just one of those moments that you just look around and at all the other journalists, very senior journalists, and they all know the magnitude of what's about to happen. And then when Carl actually started to talk and say the words, Macro and Ciara Glennon and Sarah Spears, although they didn't charge Sarah at that time, but she was mentioned in the press conference, and of course Jane Rimmer. You just knew it was going to be a huge day, and as it's turned out for a lot of us, including me, it's been a huge 3.5 years.
Okay, so we've got some audio from that press conference.
But this has already been the biggest and most complex police investigation in WA history. Hundreds of police officers have worked on this case over the past 20 years. Operation Macro has been a massive body of work involving thousands and thousands of investigative actions. The commitment of the WA Police and its officers have never wavered. We never give up.
I just remember it being very tense, and then your role takes over, as Rabs and Justin have just said. You get lost in what you have to do, not what you think you must do. You just almost go into autopilot. So you're immediately on the phone to the desk, then you're filing for online, making sure the quotes are right, getting it quickly so it can get up, and then we had to make the dash down to St George's Terrace to the court for 10 a.m. For that hearing, and everyone in the court knew why we were there. The security guards were particularly sort of noticing what you were doing and what you were bringing in, checking bags, maybe a little bit harder than they usually do. And then it was a very small courtroom. It's courtroom 42 in the Magistrates Court, which is the overnight arrest court. And I'm pretty sure that court has never seen anything quite like that, because it was absolutely packed. I mean, you could only probably sit about 30 or 40 in there anyway, and it was full with police, lawyers, media. I mean, anyone who really wanted to get in had to be there quite early, as we tried to be. And then we just sat and just waited for the case to be called, which was a while actually, because Mr. Edwards was given had access to a lawyer, obviously, as he was entitled to do, and he had a very senior lawyer actually turned up to help him that morning. He spent quite a bit of time in the cells with him, just presumably explaining exactly what the process was going to be. And there were a few sort of a few bitten fingernails and a few sort of chewed pens in that sort of 25 minutes as we were waiting for him to be brought up from the custody.
And you've mentioned that, you really do go onto autopilot and you don't have time to sit there and be stunned or gobsmacked or digest this information. You're just trying to get this information out there.
Yeah. I mean, Ray and Justin will attest to this. You sometimes have days like this when it's a big story. You don't really have time to think as it's happening. I mean, me and Ray attended an incident up in Kalgoorlie a few years ago, which was exactly like that. It was going to be a protest, which turned into a riot, which turned into a major incident. And I remember that day. There were only a few moments that day that you could just actually sort of comprehend and think or process what was happening. The rest of the time, you're just doing your job. And that day was like the day of Mr. Edwards. His first appearance was like that too, because there's so much to think about in terms of just professionally what you need to do, instructions you're getting from various sources. You're being asked questions. You're trying to answer, but maybe you don't have all the information that you'd like. And Macro has always been like that. Macro has always been a case of, as we've heard so many people say in the podcast so far, it's been a case of trying to chisel out those tiny little nuggets of information over the years. And then it all came in one slew, it seemed. Carla described what the charges were, and there were other charges on top that we now know a lot about, but at the time we didn't know hardly anything about the rape at Karrakatta and Huntingdale. And then you just write and talk and ask as many questions as you can and try and pin it down as much as you can.
So Tim, you've gone from this very tense press conference, and then you've literally had to run to court to get for the start of court, in the hope that you would make it in time to see the entrance of Bradley Edwards. Can you tell us what that moment was like when he enters the courtroom? Yeah,
well, as I say, it had been tense already. Then it was a dash. Then it was a waiting time. Because he'd been around the more senior journalists had been around the court for a little while. You sort of knew what was going on. There were a lot of media there, senior and more junior. Some of them were just sort of looking around, sort of what is going on. But when I saw Mr. Van Dongen, Sam Van Dongen, who's a very senior barrister in Perth, one of the best, walking into court and then out again, I thought, oh, well, there's only one reason why he's here. So as soon as Sam comes back, we know we're ready. And the clock started ticking, and you're texting, you're emailing the news desk, you're talking to each other, you're wondering what's going on, you're speculating about, what'll happen. And then as quickly as you got there, he was up, and in 42, because it's a custody suite, it's behind glass. It's basically a glass cage with a secure door. Obviously, there were a lot of security around Mr. Edwards on that day, but he stood up. He was asked his name, and then the process began.
So, do you remember what he looked like?
I didn't know what I really expected, because I'd seen the footage from your footage and Justin's pictures from overnight, but you couldn't really see much. I'd seen the footage that the opposition had got, but didn't realise what they'd got. And again, there was a hood and there was some stubble. But then when he was there, you're straining to look. It's quite a dim, sort of dimly lit room behind glass. Lots of people there. But he just looked entirely normal, just a normal...
Like your neighbour.
Exactly like your neighbour. And that's what the neighbours actually told Jamie that he was. He was their neighbour. And he was dressed in the same clothes, obviously, because he'd been... so we now know what had happened was after he was taken from the house where the opposition got him, he was taken straight to cold case, where they had immediate DNA taken from him as soon as he arrived. Then they waited for that DNA to be processed before they formally charged him, and that was about 20 minutes before you and Justin saw him, Raab. So they charged him in the morning, that very early morning, and in between, we think that's when they did their interview, the 6.5-hour interview that we're going to see in a few weeks in court. And then he was taken watch house, processed, told his rights, seen the lawyer, and then up he came. And he didn't look like you would think a man accused of those things would look. Slightly portly, slightly unshaven, but otherwise just completely normal.
Tim, did he look around? Did he check out who was in the courtroom?
He did a little bit. But there wasn't much body language or interaction. I don't think he was probably expecting anyone to be there. But what I do remember is as he was being led away after he'd been... So he wasn't read the charges, but Mr. Van Dongen said he certainly had been informed of them and understood them. He was asked his name, are you? And he agreed. And then Evan Shackleton, who was the magistrate that day, explained that he couldn't even hear a bail application because of those charges. It has to go to a higher court, and that was it. But as he was being led away, there was just the slightest smile. And I've watched Mr. Edwards walk in and out of dock hundreds of times, and very, very often he has that same sort of just slight smile on his lips as he walks out of court, and that was that. And for something that so many people had waited so long for, it was over in a flash that day. But then you go back into autopilot because the paper wants a lot of content from that small appearance. But now, obviously, I wasn't the only one working on this story. Half the newsroom were working on this story on that day, including two colleagues who aren't at the paper anymore, but I trusted implicitly, and they actually got the story. They spent that day firming up the story about the kimono, which no one had written before, but through their sources at Major Crime, they were able then the following day in the West Australian to break the story about basically how the arrest had come about, including the importance of that kimono that we now know so much about.
Yeah, I mean, it was extraordinary because, like we've said before, that we had zero information and then we just had an avalanche and we could barely believe the information that we were hearing. Ray, you mentioned that you felt quite a strong connection and didn't want to leave or miss a shot because you had been covering this investigation since it began in the 90s.
To me, it was the final piece in the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
We had everything. We knew, we knew a fair bit. We just didn't know who it was.
Yeah.
We had suspicions. We had people on the radar. Lance, to mention a few. I remember I shot the interview with Alison Fan with Lance in his apartment.
And we've talked a lot about that interview in this podcast and how long Alison and yourself were in Lance's house
and
to the point
by herself, and she never forgave me for that. But
well, he wouldn't stop talking.
Yeah, he was quite reluctant, but yeah, now when I look back, I actually feel really sorry for him, But the other thing that for me, spending nights up at Claremont and around Bayview Terrace and filming taxis and police doing their stuff up there, and then being in a helicopter flying up north to Pippedini Road where Kira Glenham was found, the body was found. And again, we didn't know what it was at first. We knew that something big's happened, a body had been found. So, I got up in the chopper and I started doing laps around, filming the police below and all that sort of stuff. And then we landed on the road because it was a cul-de-sac. And I remember walking up to the scene and the police said, "Oh, look, can you give us a few minutes and we'll let you get some pictures." And sure enough, it was a gravesite. It was very close to the road, which was actually quite surprising, But, when that happened, and then, you see the final moment. It's alleged at the moment that he is the man, but, yeah, there's a certain amount of excitement in the air when you see that unfold.
And I guess for yourself, you have personally been touched through your work to this story, and really, as we've talked about in the podcast, so many people in Perth feel like they have a connection and everybody wants to see this through to the end and have a conclusion one way or the other.
Oh, look, I feel for the parents. I don't think you'll ever get closure. There's no such thing as closure. But you're getting answers to your questions. You can never turn the clock back. But for me, it's about the parents. I just, they've got something.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for that. I think for people, it's a really fascinating insight into how it works because it's the sort of thing that most people wouldn't hear about, how the media go about a massive event like this and getting the information out to the public. So thank you very much to the three of you for stepping us through that. Now, Tim, we obviously didn't have a court day today. Do you know what will be happening tomorrow?
Yeah, we've got a fair idea. So Mr. McDonald, who's the Salmark /Path West /FSS forensic scientist, he'll be coming back onto the stand and he will get cross-examined by Mr. Jovich in the morning on all the work he did on Kira's fingernails, or work he oversaw on Kira's fingernails in the UK, and other stuff, obviously other Claremont exhibits that were taken to the UK in 2017 and 2018, and we anticipate some of that will revolve around possible contamination that may have happened at Path West at an earlier stage, which Salmark then discovered. So, it's going to be a big day for him and a big day for Mr. Edwards' defence lawyer. Yeah.
Well, we'll be back to chat about that tomorrow with Damien Cripps. That's day 53 of Claremont in Conversation, and we'll talk to you then.
This podcast was produced by Kate Ryan and Alicia Preedy and recorded in the studios of 7 West Media. Audio files were provided from the archives of the 7 Network and the West Australian. Sign up for daily emails and all the latest on the Claremont trial at thewest.com.au.
Enjoying this podcast? If the story behind the headline matters to you, then you can count on thewest.com.au to deliver. For more on Claremont the Trial, follow the live blog Watch the nightly news updates and sign up for daily email updates at thewest.com.au. Subscribe now for just $1 a day at thewest.com.au.